I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place the mission first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am Army Strong.
There's strong, and there's Army Strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
Sometimes riders feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
Hey folks, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Dr. Richard Harden. We are on the same mission, which is waking up America. We just have different paths. So stay tuned for some information on how you can keep up with Richard and all his work.
Visit Richard's website at raharden.com. That's the World Wide Web at RAHARDIN.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit Amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Harden to see and purchase his books.
Every day, the men and women of the United States Marine Corps stand ready to defend the American way of life. The few, the proud, the Marines.
The following message contains a special offer for listeners of this station. Are you a man over 40? Are you constantly looking for the nearest bathroom? Do you wake up multiple times a night to use the bathroom? Right now, Perfect Prostate is sending out free bottles of their groundbreaking new formula to listeners of this station. Perfect Prostate formula was developed by medical doctor Mitchell Fleischer, and its ingredients have been clinically studied to reduce your frequent nighttime bathroom visits and promote healthy urine flow. Right now, preferred customers get their first bottle of Perfect Prostate absolutely free. There's nothing to lose. Perfect Prostate is guaranteed to reduce that constant urge to use the bathroom, especially at night, and promote healthy urine flow. Don't wait. Call now for your free bottle. Just pay shipping and processing. Dial 1-800-675-0251. That's 1-800-675-0251. Supplies are limited. One free bottle per household. Call now. Dial 1-800-675-0251. That's 1-800-675-0251.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
My name is Jessie. I'm a United States Special Forces widow. This gives me a unique perspective on the world around us. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you how I see it, and I won't pull any punches. This is my POV, which stands for Point of View.
Alright, this is Jessie. I am so happy to be back with you guys. You know I miss you when we're not talking. Alright. It has been quite the holiday time. Yep, that's the news prep. What can I say? I've got Afghanistan, I've got looking ahead to 2017, I've got South China Sea, I've got Iran, I've got South Korea, oh yeah. I've got, of course, more about the UN resolution, and I've got State Department audio clips about several of these topics. It was a real interesting State Department news brief. John Kirby picked up a cold over the weekend, and he coughed. And he coughed. And I believe here's one of his coughing spells. See if I've got one isolated here. And I wish him well. Nope, that was one of the reporters. He coughed in several locations.
Yeah. I felt.
But what can I say? I'll look for one of his coughs later. I've got the more important stuff already pulled. But John Kirby coughed and ummed his way through yet another press conference.
You're not precluding that they didn't discuss it. Are you saying that when
I don't have a readout.
Here?
Yeah, I don't have a readout of that meeting in front of me. I said I can imagine that they talked about Middle East peace broadly and efforts to reinvigorate the process. I don't know that they discussed the possible action at the UN, but of course, as I said in answer to Leslie's question, that was something that was in the mix for some months now. In New York at the UN, that there might be some action taken.
And what about New Zealand when the secretary was there before Antarctica? And also, I believe he had a meeting here with Mr. Shukri at some point in early December. Was the resolution discussed at either of those meetings?
Again, I can't specifically say whether.
In other words, John Kirby at the statement at the spokesdepartment can't say yes, can't say no. He waffled all around. Yes, he waffled, just like the head of the State Department. Well, it seems John Kerry is going to attempt to clear things up tomorrow. Oh, yes.
But I can announce that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will deliver remarks on Middle East peace tomorrow morning on Wednesday, December 28th, 2016, at the U.S. Department of State.
Yep. Tomorrow. But I gotta say, I don't think anybody's buying it.
In this speech, the Secretary will lay out a comprehensive vision for how he believes the conflict can be resolved in the Middle East. And all of his remarks, of course, will be open to the press, and this event will be live streamed at state.gov.
Here's one of the reporters who I don't think bought what John Kirby was selling.
I mean, tensions have been increasing since the UN vote on Friday. I'm sure you've seen all the reports and heard a lot of the words. These Israeli officials are now being quoted as saying that they have evidence that they will lay out to the Trump administration in which the U.S., specifically Kerry, had discussions with the Palestinians before the vote, a few weeks before, during a visit to Washington where Saeb Erekat was around. Basically that he pushed them to go to Egypt to move ahead with this resolution. That's one of the things.
Okay, so what was the U.S. involved? Here's the first answer to the part of that answer.
Is that we reject the notion that the United States was the driving force behind this resolution. That's just not true. The United States did not draft this resolution, nor did it put it forward. It was drafted, initially introduced, as we all know, by Egypt in coordination with the Palestinians and others. When it was clear that the Egyptians and the Palestinians would insist on bringing this resolution to a vote, and that every other country on the Council would in fact support it, we made clear to others, including those on the Security Council, that further changes were needed to make the text more balanced. And that's a standard practice with regard to resolutions at the Security Council. So there's nothing new to this. You look like you're pouncing on me, but go ahead. No.
Okay, so he says this was nothing to see here. I'm not buying it. Now, of course, what's been out there in the press is that Biden called Ukraine and urged them to vote for the resolution. Of course, Biden says, nope, 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 not me. Nope, nope, nope. And Benjamin Netanyahu is, of course, going, if you don't think the U.S. was behind at least part of this, you're cuckoo. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lashed out on Saturday what he called old world bias against Israel, attacking Obama and the United Nations over a resolution that criticized Israeli settlement activity in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Netanyahu compared Obama to former President Jimmy Carter, whom he called hostile to Israel and the last president to break with U.S. commitments to support the state, which, may I remind my listeners, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Oh yeah. And, of course, the State Department is filled with more fluff and stuff than I care to air on my show. But that's the way it goes some days, folks. I mean, this resolution addresses East Jerusalem. It addresses West Bank, Gaza Strip. Now, Israel, the reason it builds settlements, and for those of you who didn't listen in last night, I encourage you, it was an extended edition. However, it is very much, as you know, I don't like to waste your time. It was an extended edition, but we discussed this resolution in depth. In fact, my occasional cohort Dave Brewer, who I may actually make a regular feature on occasional Saturday Slowdowns, had a lot of interesting comments about it. So it's one of those things. The resolution speaks of secure and recognized boundaries. Now, that isn't necessarily the case. What the UN won't admit because of their anti-Israel bias is there's no such thing as a pre-1967 border. That quote-unquote green line running through West Bank is the 1949 Armistice Line. The Armistice Line was created solely because that's Israeli and Arab forces. That's where Israeli and Arab forces stopped fighting at the end of the War of Independence, with some added adjustments in certain sectors. Therefore, the 1949 line, that people call the 1967 border, is really only a military line. In fact, the 1949 Armistice Agreement with the Jordanians explicitly specified that the line was designated a military, did not compromise any future territorial claims of the two parties, since it had been dictated exclusively by military consideration. Of course, the Jordanian rationale for this clause was to allow them to claim territory inside the armistice line for their very own. However, Israel has managed to turn this on its ear. Even if the Palestinians were to change their minds about wiping Israel off the map, they never have. Don't hold your breath. I doubt they ever will. There would have remained another major barrier to Israel reverting to pre-June 1967 borders. They don't exist. During negotiations to create UN Resolution 242, Arab governments tried 3 times to have the inserted in the resolution, and their request was rejected. Even famous UN Resolution 242, which was passed by the UN Security Council 5 months after the Six-Day War, recognized that the 1949 armistice line was not supposed to designate final Israeli borders. So here's the UN saying, oh, we were wrong in 1949. We were wrong in Resolution 242. Anti-Israeli forces have changed the meaning of 242 by adding one simple article to the resolution. They claim that 242 calls for Israel to withdraw from, quote, the territories taken during the Six-Day War. The resolution actually says Israel should withdraw from territories taken during the war. No article the. Adding the article changes the meaning from withdraw from some territories to all territories. It was no accident the was left out. Diplomats are extremely OCD in their language. During negotiations to create Resolution 242, Arab governments tried to have this word inserted, and it was rejected. Statements made by the drafters of 242 prove there's no ambiguity about what they meant. Lord Caradon, sponsor of the draft that was eventually adopted, stated before the vote in the Security Council on Resolution 242, the draft resolution is a balanced whole. To add to it or detract from it would destroy the balance and also destroy the wide measure of agreement we have achieved together. It must be considered as a whole as it stands. I suggest we have reached the stage when most, if not all of us, want the draft resolution, the whole draft resolution, and nothing but the draft resolution. And Michael Stewart was Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs from Great Britain or the United Kingdom, responded to a question in Parliament in 1969. What is the British interpretation of the wording of the 1967 resolution? Does the Right Honourable Gentleman understand it to mean that the Israelis should withdraw from all territories taken in the late war? No, sir, that is not the phrase used in the resolution. The resolution speaks of secure and recognized boundaries. These words must be read concurrently with statements on withdrawal. George Brown, British Foreign Secretary in 1967, said, I've been asked over and over again to clarify, modify, or improve the wording, but I do not intend to do that. The phrasing of Resolution 242 was worked out carefully. It was a difficult and complicated exercise to get it accepted by the UN Security Council. I formulated the Security Council resolution. Before we submitted it to the Council, we showed it to Arab leaders. The proposal said Israel will withdraw from territories that were occupied and not from the territories, which means Israel will not withdraw from all territories. All right, the Six-Day War was a war. Get this straight. Are we supposed to give back territory we conquered during the revolution? Are we supposed to give back land that we conquered over the ages? I don't think that's how war works. Oh, and just to remind you, I have Host Kitty's wonderful opinion on the resolution, and I happen to agree with Host Kitty. Yep, he's hissing at it. What can I say? Go, Host Kitty. Now, of course, there's always the right of return, which is dodgy. It's like a lot of things, you can interpret it 9 ways to Sunday. I would need a legal expert, and I don't have one in my back pocket. So we are going to move on. But I'm going to say that I agree with Netanyahu that the U.S. had a finger in this somewhere, somehow. Oh, and I've also got one more audio clip. Let me get it pulled up. I believe it's right here. This is from Press TV, Iranian TV.
Now, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has once again questioned the effectiveness of the United Nations by saying that the world body is just a club for people to have a good time. Trump has said that the world body has turned into a place for people to just get together and talk. Trump's criticism comes in the wake of the Security Council's vote condemning Israeli settlements built in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem al-Quds after 1967. The resolution was passed overwhelmingly with U.S. abstention. Following the vote, Donald Trump announced that things would change after January 20th when he takes office. Let us now.
So even Iran's gotten the message that things may not stay the same after January 20th, when Donald Trump raises his right hand. And we hear something like this. Give me just a moment, gotta get it all queued up. Wasn't planning on this one. Here it is. Yes, we will hear Hail to the Chief played for Donald Trump. Whatever you think of him, whatever you don't think of him, it is a fact he will become our president of the United States on January 20th. Now, I do have one more audio clip, and I don't think I've played this. We've played enough State Department today, haven't we? I think we have. So we're going to move right along. How peace between Afghanistan and the Taliban foundered. There was an exchange in Geneva. There are meetings that are still continuing to negotiate for peace. The exchange would initiate intense secretive process that over 3 years involved 2 or 3 meetings a month between Norwegian diplomats and fugitive Taliban representatives across cities in Asia and Europe, including Karachi, Bangkok, and Oslo. Astoundingly, the diplomats said they even had one direct late-night audience with Mullah Omar himself. Years after, even senior Taliban leaders said they had last been in a room with him. The Norwegian peace track overlapped efforts by other countries to bring Taliban to the table, including the United States and Saudi Arabia, and for years seemed to be making the most progress towards bringing Taliban and Afghan officials back together. But eventually, it all fell apart. Under the weight of military and intelligence maneuvering and a distrust among host countries that were taking a hand in Afghan affairs. Mr. Ramsilian maintains that Pakistan in particular has been a central obstacle to any negotiated peace with the Taliban. Now remember, the Taliban essentially has a safe haven in Pakistan. And there's that border region that might as well not even have a border in many cases. So, details. Taliban fighters. The Taliban and Pakistanis have a frenemy relationship. It's a complex part of the nature of war that has spun over for nearly 4 decades in its various chapters and has been fought or aided by ever-shifting and changing, conflicting array of international interests. For instance, the early Norwegian efforts were so hushed they were kept a secret even from the Americans, and for the first 2 years the Europeans feared the United States, which had flatly refused. Efforts by senior Taliban officials to surrender and reconcile with the Afghan government in 2001 and 2002 would derail their efforts by targeting any Taliban emissaries for death or imprisonment. Today, even as the United States has fully embraced the idea that political resolution offers the only lasting way out of the war in Afghanistan, the peace process seems stalled, or at least confused. The Afghan government had a round of talks in Pakistan in the summer of 2015, but it fell apart quickly with the question still unanswered about the legitimacy of representative who Pakistani officials had pressured the Taliban to send. The early Norwegian contacts were maintained around the personal relationships of Mr. Ramsilian, an unconventional diplomat who had been a Christian missionary in Pakistan in the 1960s. He understood the Taliban's worldview and was rooted in religion and could communicate with them and even interpret for them. He even spoke Urdu fluently. During his years as diplomat in Islamabad, stretching to the 90s, Ramsilian had made an impression not only on the Taliban government in Afghanistan, but also on the Pakistani madrasas, which are the religious schools that gave birth to the Taliban movement to this day and fill its ranks with foot soldiers. Many of these seminaries are a legacy of American funding of the Islamic insurgency against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. After the Soviet withdrawal and after the United States virtually abandoned the region in the 90s, Mr. Ramsilian made a priority of continuing engagement with Pakistan and Afghan religious leaders when he felt it was necessary, because in isolation these figures could become more dangerous. Like I said, early efforts by Mr. Ramsilian and his Norwegian colleagues were focused on helping the Taliban, a rural military group with little political sophistication, come up with a set of cohesive demands for a meeting. And so this gentleman, who I would agree, very unusual diplomatic style, literally had no problem helping the people he may not agree with, just so he could try and get them to state a cohesive and measurable goal. Unfortunately, Mr. Ramsilian lost hope, moving on to take his final posting as ambassador to Nepal before retiring from the service. And years later, as others are steadily working to revive the hope for a negotiated settlement, officials are still stuck on the question of Pakistan's involvement, with some coming to believe that despite the risks of alienating Pakistan, it may be time to approach the Taliban through other channels. Alright. Now, as you know, many people were home for the holidays, relaxing, enjoying their festivities, but this wasn't the case for our armed services, and I will have your What Happened in Mosul over the weekend update after we take a commercial break. Yeah, gotta pay them bills, folks, gotta pay them bills. Just looking at the news updates that come in over my phone and my tablet. You know, if something breaks while I'm on the air, I will bring it to you if at all possible. Alrighty. Well, we're going to pay those bills, and I will see you on the other side.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from the critique of the short story through to line edits on full-length novels. We also offer assistance on generating writers' bios for your websites. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
I've owned my company for 14 years now, and I can tell you that payroll is a 4-letter word. I hate doing it. It eats up hours I don't have, and it costs me money I could be saving. But my accountant's too expensive, and I'm not sure who to call. But I know I need help.
We're Paychex, and we take all the hassles out of small business payroll. We save you time and money. It's easy. Call, fax, or give us your payroll information securely online, and we take care of the rest. We calculate the correct taxes, manage payments and direct deposits. We even send out your checks. Payroll doesn't need to be a 4-letter word anymore. We're so sure that we can save you time and money that we'll give you a month's payroll free. Just for calling 877-757-2782. Get 1 month's payroll for free. Call Paychex right now. 877-757-2782. That's 877-757-2782.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
All right. Thank you very much for hanging in there with me over that commercial break. Gotta pay those bills, folks. Gotta pay those bills. Doesn't everybody have to pay their bills? Well, I do have one more. Speaking of U.S. policies, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has finalized a measure to have foreign travelers provide social media accounts when they enter the country. Border Security started asking travelers coming into the country to voluntarily provide their Facebook, Twitter, and other social media accounts. Politico first reported this when individuals apply for visa waivers are prompted with the option to include their accounts on the aforementioned platforms: Google+, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Government has received substantial criticism from groups like the Internet Association, which represents Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and the ACLU and the Electronic Frontier Foundation. The program would invade individual privacy, imperil freedom of expression while being ineffective and prohibitively expensive to implement and maintain. The groups noted the impact would fall the hardest on Arab and Muslim communities whose usernames, posts, contacts, social networks will be exposed to intense scrutiny. The agency, of course, defended the measure, arguing that it will help spot potential threats to homeland security and have noted it is optional. No offense. If you know something's optional, you're going to opt in? I certainly wouldn't. All right. Now for your fight against terrorism update, which is now what I'm calling the Mosul, Syria, blah, 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 etc. update. U.S. military killed 15 AQAP, which stands for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, operatives in 6 previously unannounced airstrikes that took place throughout Yemen. Yes, the forgotten war of Yemen. Over the last 4 months, the U.S. has now launched 37 strikes against AQAP in 2016, the largest yearly total since 2012, which was 41 strikes. CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, announced their operation. A statement released on December 22nd noted that AQAP is a foreign terrorist organization with a history of attacks against the United States and its allies. Previous CENTCOM announcements, however, have described AQAP as a significant threat to the region and to the United States. CENTCOM listed 9 strikes with 25 AQAP operatives killed. However, 3 of the strikes were previously reported by CENTCOM. 15 AQAP operatives are reported to have been killed in the 6 new strikes. CENTCOM acknowledged that one of the strikes, which took place on September 29th, was previously announced, but the number of AQAP operatives killed was updated from 1 to 2 as a hospitalized terrorist later died of those injuries. So, the 6 new strikes took place in the provinces of Al-Bayad, Marib, Shabwa, and Hadramaut. AQAP is known to operate in all 4 provinces, and the U.S. military has launched numerous strikes there since 2009. The U.S. stepped up its air campaign against AQAP in Yemen. Targets of the U.S. campaign have varied, and all aspects of AQAP's network have come under fire. So, AQAP remains entrenched in southern and central Yemen despite active targeting of the group and its leaders by the United States for 8 years. Now, of course, we have to have approval of the Yemeni government in exile. The government was forced to flee the capital of Sana'a after Houthi rebels overran it, as well as several provinces, and the Houthi rebels also overran several provinces in both north and central Yemen. Yeah. It's been crazy. What can I say? And in other intriguing international news, Aleppo. Russian troops find mass graves of civilians in Aleppo. Does that surprise anybody that there's mass graves in Aleppo? I know it didn't surprise me. Russia's defense ministry said on December 26 its troops had found mass graves in the Syrian city of Aleppo with many bodies showing signs of torture and mutilation. The Russian defense ministry spokesman, Major General Igor Konoshikov, said that dozens of bodies have been covered, with some of them bearing gunshot wounds. Human rights observers and media have recorded many examples of massacres and organized torture carried out by the government, opposition, and the extremist Islamic State group in Syria, aka Daesh, folks, Daesh. The Russian Air Force helped the Syrian army recapture Aleppo on December 22nd, months after a major offensive to retake the city was launched in September. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said on December 25th that at least 63 Syrian soldiers and militiamen have been killed by booby traps in Aleppo. Russia had accused the rebels of laying multiple booby traps and mines across the city. So there are mass graves. Who's at fault? That's something I'm going to have to keep an eye on because it's murky. It could be any number of people having a paw in this one. Oh yes, there are many paws at play here. And if you remember your Syrian scorecard, who is backing up Bashar al-Assad? Russia, Iran, and to some extent China. And who's one of Iran's trading partners? Well, the other most sanctioned nation on the planet, North Korea. All right. Moving right along. Senator Lindsey Graham will propose a measure to pull U.S. funding for the United Nations unless the UN Security Council repeals the resolution it passed condemning the Israeli settlements. It is important to me, he is quoted as saying, that this is a road we haven't gone down before. If you can't show American people that the international organizations can be more responsible, there's going to be a break. And I'm going to lead that break. I will do everything in my power, working with the new administration and Congress, to leave no doubt where America stands when it comes to the peace process and where we stand with the only true democracy in the Middle East, which is Israel. Graham added that U.S. funding accounts for 22% of the UN's budget. This came after the United States on Friday allowed a UN security resolution condemning Israeli settlement construction to be adopted, defying significant pressure from Benjamin Netanyahu's government in alliance with President-elect Donald Trump. Harry, Obama foreign policy has gone from naive to foolish to flat-out reckless. With friends like these, Israel doesn't need enemies. Graham is quoted as saying, I anticipate this vote will create a backlash in Congress against the United Nations. The organization is increasingly viewed as anti-Semitic and seems to have lost all sense of proportionality. Alright, I'm going to have to say the UN does appear to be anti-Semitic because the UNESCO, people that designate World Heritage Sites, and if you're a regular listener to this show, this is not news to you. Just a moment, I'm pulling up the vote. Paris and France-based UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, usually referred to as UNESCO, is making an attempt to distort history in favor of the Palestinians by voting to declare Jerusalem's holiest site, the Western Wall, a Muslim holy site. Well, that vote did pass, and many people, including Benjamin Netanyahu, have come out against it, and Benjamin Netanyahu has said UNESCO is full of crap. Actually, he said something I can't repeat on air. UNESCO is the first UN body to accept Palestine, quote-unquote, as a member of the JTA. Notes that that proposal could have had a good chance of passing because the majority of UNESCO's 58 members have historically supported Palestinian bids, the majority of which have presented hostility towards the Jewish state. In 2013, the U.S. refused to pay its $80 million dues, which accounts for 22% of UNESCO's budget, and Israel also suspended its dues, both nations losing their voting rights in UNESCO. UNESCO's decision to make Palestine a member in 2011 The decision reportedly brought the agency to the brink of financial crisis, and in apparent retaliation, one of the programs it cut back was U.S.-led initiatives such as Holocaust education. Alright. Now, if cutting Holocaust education and declaring the Western Wall isn't anti-Semitic, especially when you look at the two of them together, I don't see how you can call it any other way. A Palestinian mob set fire to Joseph's tomb, a Jewish holy site located in the Fatah-controlled West Bank. Fatah still takes direction from the terrorist group Hamas, which reigns over the Gaza Strip. In In a statement, Ronald Lauder, who serves as the president of the World Jewish Congress, said that adopting the UNESCO resolution would exacerbate tensions in Israel. Well, UNESCO did adopt the resolution, declaring the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, Judaism's holiest place, a Muslim site, would be a travesty. Instead of fostering peace, it would only encourage extremists to step up their campaign, both in Israel and beyond. So, the UNESCO bid aims to falsely claim the Western Wall as part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and to call it the BURAQ Plaza. Barak Plaza, I'm guessing. Or Baruch. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one, so we're just going to leave the pronunciation kind of alone. Alright. Now, we have a little bit more on our Middle East update. 2 top U.S. generals say it will take 2 more years to beat ISIS. The commanding general of the coalition forces in Iraq, which is General Townsend, which you've heard him speak on this program before through his press conferences, predicts it will take 2 years of hard work to clear Daesh from its twin capitals of Mosul and Raqqa and then burn out the remnants that will likely flee to the vast empty desert between Syria and Iraq. In a sit-down at his headquarters, Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend would not put specific timelines on the battle, but he mapped out a grinding campaign that he thinks is going slowly, but as well as can be expected, considering how much time Daesh had to prepare and how brutal its fighters are willing to be. After a fighter walking out of a building holding a child over his head so we can see him through our scopes, and he reaches another building, he said, using the military acronym for intelligence through ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. The grim battle against Daesh is taking place against the backdrop of continuing sectarian tension in Iraq, which could get worse if newly empowered militia groups let their influence go to their head. A new Iraqi law that goes into force this week makes militia forces here illegal. Such groups, especially Iranian-backed Shiite armed forces, have already been accused of war crimes against Iraq's Sunni minority. The U.S. has ordinarily eyed these units warily, but Townsend, in an unusual statement for an American commander, said these militias have been remarkably disciplined allies since he arrived. That assessment marks a stark contrast with his previous tours when deadly Iranian-manufactured bombs almost hit his vehicle and took the lives of many of his troops. However, the current coalition footprint is much smaller than the 100,000 plus of Townsend's previous tours in Iraq. Somewhere south of 10,000 troops on short-term duty are added to the count. At headquarters compound, soldiers were taking a brief break from work on Christmas to stage a spoon relay race in the hallway. The headquarters is tucked inside the sprawling quote-unquote green zone which the U.S. used to run, now turned over to Iraqi control. The Americans feel very much like visitors. U.S. authority extends to the gate of the compound. All outside is done with the Iraqi government permission. Townsend's team is very aware that they are there to help, not lead. So, it could take up to 2 years. Yes, 2 years. And of course, in the tragic summer of 2014, Daesh was rampaging across Iraq and Syria, racing borders and massacring opponents and minority groups. President Barack Obama and his national security team knew they had to stop the advance and knew that any military action would put at risk at least the lives of 4 Americans being held by the group in Syria. One after another, American hostages, James Foley, Stephen Sotlock, and Peter Kasich, were murdered. The 4th, Carolyn Mueller, was killed in 2015. Intense month before and after their death, Lisa Monaco, the senior counterterrorism advisor to the president, was meeting with grief-stricken families. They told me about their frustration, their disappointment, and confusion about how the government was handling, finding, and recovering their loved ones. For Monaco, those meetings became the basis for a White House-directed effort to change the way the United States works to bring American hostages home, and just importantly, how they work with family. Today, family members of those taken captive and their advocates point to improvements. There's greater coordination within the government and a greater willingness to share information, said Rachel Briggs, Executive Director of Hostage US, a nonprofit group that provides support to families and released hostages. It is much improved today from what it was. Is there further distance to travel? Yes. The challenge for the White House is ensuring that hard-won lessons, many of which came at the expense of American hostages and their family, are passed along to the Trump administration, that the government continues to make progress at the dauntingly complex task of hostage recovery. Gauging improvements to hostage recovery processes that is by necessary cloaked in secrecy can be difficult. To oversee recovery efforts and communicate with families, the Obama administration created a single fusion cell that includes representatives of the FBI, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the intelligence community. We were making hard and sincere efforts to find and bring back our people, Monaco said, but there was often little coordination among government agencies and no unified strategy. Hostage recovery was rarely a top priority for military or intelligence officials managing wars or seeking to stop the next terrorist attack. Since the fusion cell was set up in 2015, it has overseen almost 100 recoveries, about 25% of which came from terrorist groups. Officials refuse to break down the numbers, but the overall figure includes people who are kidnapped by criminal gangs in different parts of the world. But hostages from the United States are still less likely to make it home safely than hostages from other nations. We've got a lot of data and number crunching behind these numbers. Outcomes for Americans are significantly worse than any other group. Some of the differences could be the U.S. government's refusal to pay for the release of Americans. On theory, it encourages only more hostage-taken. Americans may be more attractive targets because of the United States' superpower status. The toughest case involving hostages taken by stateless jihadist groups, a Taliban ally that kidnapped Caitlin Coleman, 31, and her husband Joseph Boyle in the Afghan-Pakistan border region, released a video showing the couple and their 2 toddler children. We have waited since 2012 for someone to understand our problems, Coleman said, while her Canadian husband and the children who were born in captivity sat nearby. The group is believed to have grabbed Coleman and Boyle while they were backpacking in Afghanistan in 2012. All right. First of all, folks, don't go to Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, North Korea. Come on. I wouldn't advise Pakistan either. Can we just cross those countries off the where I'd like to vacation list? This is getting ridiculous. Alright, I've got a lot more to get to in just a few moments to get it done. A senior North Korean official who defected told reporters that the North viewed 2017 as the best time to advance their nuclear program because it could take advantage of leadership changes in the United States and South Korea. The official, Tae Yong-ho, North Korea's number 2 diplomat in London, is the most senior North Korean official to defect in nearly 2 decades. At a news conference, his first meeting with outside journalists since his defection in August, he cautioned that as a diplomat he was not privy to the status of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Yet he said North Korea was also confident that China would not punish it too harshly for its nuclear program, out of fear that the North's collapse would create a pro-American unified Korea on its border. And now you know why. Now you know why China keeps propping up North Korea. All right. In 2016, North Korea has conducted 2 nuclear tests and launched more than 20 ballistic missiles. It has openly vowed to develop the ability to hit the United States with a nuclear warhead. President-elect Donald Trump has indicated that he was open to allowing Japan and South Korea to manufacture their own nuclear weapons to deter North Korea, an idea that drew withering response from the current administration, which said the idea flouted decades of non-proliferation policy. South Korea will be holding a presidential election next year in wake of the impeachment of South Korea's first female president, Park Geun-hye. Mr. Thae, a career diplomat, served in Denmark and Sweden before he was assigned to the North Korean embassy in London about 10 years ago. In London, he was spied delivering speeches at far-left events, including meetings of the British Communist Party, where he would speak passionately in defense of North Korea. On Tuesday, he spoke of frustration as a North Korean diplomat abroad. He said that North Korea paid its ambassadors only $900 to $1,100 a month, making its diplomats desperate for an extra income through work outside the embassy. The diplomats lived in a communal lifestyle inside their embassy to save costs. But he said they enjoyed one luxury the elites back in North Korea could not. They had access to the internet and could read news from South Korea, including updates about the lives of North Korean defectors. Mr. Thae said that back in the north, the totalitarian regime was so paranoid about outside information affecting its people, it kept surveillance on diplomats who would return home for fear they might spread outside news. Even though DVDs from China have made South Korean movies soap operas increasingly popular in the north. Mr. Thae himself was an avid fan of South Korean soap operas. South Korea has hailed his defection as a sign of loosening loyalty among North Korean elite. The North called him human scum and said he had fled after embezzling state funds and sexually assaulting a minor. Mr. Thae denied these accusations and said his disillusionment with Mr. Kim had deepened after the execution of many officials, including the leader's uncle, Jang Soon-taek, in an attempt to tighten his control through a reign of terror. The North Korean government requires its diplomats to leave some of their family members back home, holding them as hostages against possible defection. Mr. Thae said he was lucky because he could defect to the South with his wife and 2 children. North Korean diplomats are also required to monitor one another to thwart treason, but Mr. Thae said there were holes in the surveillance, though he declined to divulge the details of how he defected. It's a human world and impossible to monitor someone constantly. So, North Korea is going after the nuclear weapon. And I don't think there's any doubt from anybody. Now, I'm going to run over just a little bit, and I've received word that that is not a problem. And Ukrainian artillery forces and Democratic National Committee have something surprising in common. They were targeted by the same Russian code and spied upon by the same military intelligence unit. The finding contained a report released Thursday by security firm CrowdStrike and provides additional evidence linking the hackers working on behalf of the Russian state, in this case Russian Military Intelligence or GRU, with the 2016 digital break-in at the Democratic headquarters. Emails stolen from the Democratic Party servers eventually turned up on WikiLeaks and are a central part of what American intelligence officials described as efforts by Russia to influence the U.S. election. Thursday's report provides a direct link between the information on operations carried out against American political organizations and the armed conflicts in eastern Ukraine. According to CrowdStrike, a hacking group known as Fancy Bear attempted to spy on Ukrainian artillery units by distributing a bogus Android application used for weapons targeting. It's unclear how successful the effort was, but according to the firm, the app had potential ability to map out a unit's composition hierarchy and determine their plans, and even triangulate their approximate location. Alright, folks, this is why I don't let a lot of apps have my location. You never quite know who's on the other end of that app. You can probably trust Pizza Hut, Sam's Club, and the like. But when you get into a really hinky app, who knows? Who knows? Alright. I am going to do just 2 more articles and we are going to wrap this up, as I have just received word that both Jen and Rick in America Off the Rails will not be airing, although I believe there may be a replay for America Off the Rails tonight, but I'm going to have to check on that. Alright, last minute gifts for the most insatiable global affairs glutton. There are 9 new contingencies, including the risk of growing authoritarianism and political instability in the Philippines and Turkey, both new, quote, moderate concerns. Several other low priority contingencies, including intensification of the current political crisis in Burundi, growing civil unrest and violence in Ethiopia. 9 contingencies from last year's survey vanished: political instability in Egypt, escalation of organized crime-related violence in Mexico, increased sectarian violence in Lebanon, growing political instability in Jordan, a political confrontation between Iran and the United States and or allies over Iran's involvement in regional conflicts, political instability in Saudi Arabia, and an escalation of Islamic militancy in Russia. Also vanished is an escalation of sectarian violence in the Central African Republic and an intensification of sectarian violence in Myanmar. Finally, one surprising contingency did not make it into this list as it fell outside our foreign policy remit. When we asked 7,000 officials and experts to write in their own contingencies outside the 30 we provide, many highlighted the dangers of political instability and violence with the United States. Internal unrest within the United States, domestic U.S. political instability, post-election rhetoric, and violence and extremism. So there's a lot going on in the world. So, you foreign policy wonks like me, we have a lot to look forward to and track in the coming year. My last story is a make you smile story. Gotta end it on a long note. I didn't get to do it last night. DARPA, it's a Defense Department research agency. Let me play you some sound bites and I'll explain each one as we go.
DARPA is an agency of the Defense Department. Our job is to invest in the breakthrough technologies that can create the next generation of national security capabilities. That mission is rooted in our origins in the wake of Sputnik. That was a moment when the United States realized that we needed a way to prevent that kind of technological surprise. And dating all the way back to DARPA's foundation in 1958, our predecessors really quickly realized that the best way to prevent surprises is to go create some surprises of our own.
Alright, so now you know a little bit about DARPA. Well, guess what? They haven't only been working on weapons. They've been working on something special for wounded warriors who've lost an arm.
DARPA's Revolutionizing Prosthetics program has previously demonstrated a breakthrough upper limb prosthesis with the potential to give amputees greater independence and improved quality of life. A new partnership between DARPA and Walter Reed National Military Medical Center is now, for the first time, making this life-changing technology available to wounded warfighters. On December 22, 2016, DARPA handed off the first Luke arms to Walter Reed for prescription to patients.
Yes, DARPA, a military research agency, isn't just researching weapons.
We are delivering to Walter Reed the world's most advanced prosthetic arm system that has the same size, weight, shape, and grip strength compared to an adult human arm. It's a remarkable device. So today, we're delivering on our promise to get that technology to our military personnel. We're here to literally hand off the arms to Walter Reed for our military personnel. So with that, Paul, I'd like to present to you the arm systems. And we hope that you can use those in the best way possible to make our military personnel more whole again. Thank you so much.
This arm represents so much to so many people, knowing the hundreds of engineers, scientists, clinicians that are behind just this single arm, all motivated to help our wounded warriors, is inspirational to say the least.
Devices like these robotic arms, I think, are absolutely critical to what we do at Walter Reed every day, which is really to strive to be the best place in the world for the teaching and practice of military medicine.
All right, and I'd have to say the new Walter Reed is a far cry from the old one. And I'm going to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. And don't forget, you can always subscribe on iTunes. You can find Jesse's POV on the Google Play Store. You can find me at Blueberry, Pocket Cast, and a lot of other places. On that note, I'm out of here!